Hello, I'm Mike Gambardella, and welcome into the newest episode of Pat's Latest. Today, we look at the NFL coaching cycle, ranking all of the hires for the NFL teams. We check out another coach from the Patriots heading back to college. Yes, another one. A free agent update from a current New England Patriot, and who the Patriots actually may or may not be drafting, and who a former coach thinks they actually should go after. And the answer might surprise you. We'll start with looking at the NFL's coaches, as the coaching cycles have now been completed. The head coaches are in place. Offensive coordinators and skill positions still need to be shored up for a lot of the teams. But looking at those head coaching hires, we can now kind of say who came out the winner on this end. And I think the easiest way to do that is kind of reverse order this and go from, the Dallas Cowboys to the Chicago Bears to the Patriots and everything in between. And I think it starts as, unfortunately, the worst hire in this cycle is the Dallas Cowboys, going from Mike McCarthy. And I know that there were those that did not appreciate what McCarthy had done, especially this past year, having a lot of injuries and not seeing the playoffs after those 3 straight 12-5 seasons, deciding to go with Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. Now, a big name, family pedigree, but not really in the head coaching cycle over the past, say, 15 years. It's a guy that has been in the building, knows everything there is to know about Dallas and what makes them unique. He's not going to be the largest voice on that team. That will always be Jerry Jones. But as somebody who knows the Cowboys and has Dak Prescott's best interest at heart, Dak actually came out the other day and said, he saw the Eagles win it all, and he thinks the Cowboys are not far off from being that next team from the NFC East that could compete for a title. Brian Schottenheimer will have his work cut out for him. The cupboard is not bare, but there's a lot to fix in Dallas. So at the same time, a lot of talent there. I think that there were potentially other coaches talent-wise that could have been a better fit, but a tough spot for Dallas to start with. Moving on would be the New York Jets, another AFC East team familiar with the Patriots. The former first-round pick Aaron Glenn actually becoming the head coach of the Jets, heading back to the Meadowlands. The defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions had a ton of injuries this year, but still helped get that team to 15-2. I think Aaron Glenn could actually one day be a very good head coach. But again, I think in this day and age of offenses really taking the charge, it is tough when you're not going with an established defensive coach. There are a lot of questions around Aaron Glenn. What is his style? And again, I think he'll be a little bit like Vrabel in that wanting to establish a culture, no nonsense, and set up a winning mentality. But that could be tough with a lot of other factors going around the Jets. We know Aaron Rodgers is out the door. Devontae Adams could follow soon after. So a lot of challenges here for Aaron Glenn. The next is the newest hire in Kellen Moore, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, filling that last spot with the New Orleans Saints. Gets the edge for me ahead of Aaron Glenn, as I mentioned, for that offensive pedigree. Kellen actually becomes the youngest head coach in the NFL at 36 years of age, and maybe a little bit higher up on other people's lists, but New Orleans, again, has its own fair share of issues to deal with. Is he sold on Derek Carr as the starting quarterback? There's been a lot of injuries to the skill position players for the New Orleans Saints. The defense and offensive line have underperformed, and there is a dearth of free agent dollars to spend. So a lot of issues that Kellen Moore will have to deal with. Not to say that he can't quickly turn that one around, but he gets behind this next former offensive coordinator for me, and that is Liam Cohen. He has quickly vaulted up the ranks as an offensive coordinator, and what he did last year, especially with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield. We talked about in a previous episode about what the Jaguars did, bringing Cohen in, him declining the option to actually become their head coach. But once the Jaguars took Trent Baalke out of that GM position, Cohen actually went back and said, yes, I'll take that job, and actually has unprecedented access to have input on those personnel decisions now. That factoring in for Cohen puts him in a better spot to be successful immediately, and having someone like Lawrence as your QB1 should help things, especially when your new shiny toy of Brian Thomas as an emerging wide receiver one in the league should help things right along very quickly. For me, the number 3 hire in this cycle is Pete Carroll. And I know people will point to say a 73-year-old guy can't possibly be a top 3 hire. I think this is the right fit for a Las Vegas Raiders team searching for identity and building that culture. He's going to light up that locker room and change things around fast. Now, it may be difficult and more of a longer runway for this team to get to where they need to be. A lot of questions around the quarterback room for them as well. And Pete Carroll might not end up being the guy that gets this team over the hump in 3 to 4 years, but I think Tom Brady's fingerprints are all over this one already, setting up something for potentially 2 or 3 years down the line, but getting an established coach in there, setting up the culture, and getting things up to speed quickly, especially if Brady is leaving the commentator's booth for the owner's booth and having more impact on an NFL franchise. That does leave us with Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson as our number 1 and number 2. And for me, Mike Vrabel actually is the number 2 coach in this hiring cycle. He has been recognized as the number 1 hire by a lot of different media outlets. For me, he's falling just under Ben Johnson, and we'll get into it in a second. But quickly for Vrabel, an established head coach, a proven culture builder, a guy that's no nonsense, a guy that's going to be involved in personnel decisions, a guy that knows New England. This is a perfect scenario and perfect setup for Mike Vrabel and the Patriots. The Patriots went fast forward to actually keep him away from the Raiders. He probably would have ended up with Tom Brady and Las Vegas had the Patriots not done this, and maybe had their hand forced a little bit. Again, for me, Ben Johnson would be the number 1 hire in this cycle. You could split hairs a little bit, maybe even go 1A, 1B, but to me, the gamble is worth it for Ben Johnson. And he is going to be paired with the number 1 pick of last year's draft, Caleb Williams. You had a chance to potentially pair him with Drake May. And not to say that it would have worked out, but again, it's a gamble that you could have taken. And I think one that is a gamble where you don't necessarily have to do that with Mike Vrabel. And Robert Kraft is smart enough to know that. That said, with the talent that the Chicago Bears do have, I expect some impressive success for them in the next 2 to 3 years. Not that the Patriots can't do that as well. But at the very least, when it comes down to it, the Patriots are either 1 or 2 as the top hiring head coach in this cycle. So something that the Patriots, either way, can hang their hat on. Looking quickly over at a draft update and going to an older Patriots coach, not necessarily there, and maybe could be in an advisor role, hearing a couple different things around what Dante Scarnecchia is going to do with the Patriots this upcoming season, but was quoted earlier this week when talking about the NFL draft and what the Patriots should do. His quote here for you: "If I'm taking a guy with the 4th pick in the NFL draft, I'm taking a guy who can sack the quarterback or score touchdowns." Well, Dante, that's not an offensive lineman. That would be an Abdul Carter, correct? That would be a Tet McMillan. That would be a skill position guy. So that is one of the greatest offensive line coaches of all time saying, don't draft Will Campbell at 4. I would agree with his sentiment there, because you can go back and get those offensive linemen. You can only get those impact players so often. That would also line up with not potentially taking, in the trenches. Is Mason Graham that guy that can sack the quarterback from the interior line? I think we'll start to find that out through the combine. But Dante actually went on to say, now I'm not saying don't take an offensive tackle, he's a lineman, or a guy like that, again, because they can get them later. He said there's a lot of good football players out there, and that kind of hits twofold, right? That you can get the talented guys up front, the game changers, where the things really happen, while also getting the trench guys later on. The Patriots would potentially have the draft capital to trade back up into the first round if a Kelvin Banks slides, if Josh Connerly, all those guys that we'll start to hear about. And offensive line will be addressed probably in free agency here as well. But something to take to heart, especially when Dante Scarnecchia is saying it. Listen to that man. He knows what he's talking about. Additionally, here for the Patriots, a free agent update coming in as Jonathan Jones sat down at the Super Bowl during Media Week, talking with a lot of different outlets, and actually went on so far to talk about his own status in free agency and what he would like to do. And he got very candid about it. He actually was quoted as saying one of the goals of his was to be in place with one team my entire career. So that's the Patriots, right? Not so fast. He said more importantly, it's just to get back to winning football. So again, maybe the Patriots did make the right hire because Mike Vrabel potentially could get this team to winning football faster because he knows how to get that defense back into shape. Jonathan Jones could be an option for him and stepped up as a leader for this team. It's more if the money ends up being right and if he doesn't actually find a potential deal out there that could surpass the Patriots, and hopefully would not be this case with the Patriots having $120 million to spend in free agency. Jonathan Jones also remarked on the hiring of Vrabel, saying he thinks Vrabes can be that culture back to New England, or bring that culture back to New England, and he thinks that we can, get back to winning football games here. So good things to hear from Jonathan Jones. Again, will be interesting to see how his value is seen on the open market and how the Patriots value him here as well. It'll be very telling now with Elliott Wolf in the second year with the personnel, but knowing that Mike Vrabel is going to have a ton of input with that, and where he's going to say, hey, this is where we need to spend money, and this is the area where we need to do it. And will he actually value guys that have either been in the locker room and set the tone, or does he want to bring in guys to change where that tone is actually going? Time will tell on both. Finally, here today, another Patriots coach is headed back to college. We know that Bill Belichick is over at Chapel Hill and UNC and taking his sons with him as well. Now, former defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator for a time, and former Lions head coach Matt Patricia is headed back to college. Yes, he's going to Ohio State to become the school's defensive coordinator, finalizing that deal up on Wednesday and into Thursday here. Patricia, obviously well regarded in those circles, and coming up with the Patriots, an astrophysicist himself, not too shabby. And, coaching into the Super Bowl, winning championships. It was actually a lot of fun to hear him go on Julian Edelman's podcast last week and talk about, going through that play with Malcolm Butler, making an interception at the goal line and sealing the championship win for the Patriots. I think Matt Patricia gets very underrated because of the decisions he made when he became a head coach for the for the Detroit Lions after leaving the Patriots and then going back to the Patriots and actually being shifted, over to the offensive side of the ball, maybe outside of his comfort zone. And, even made jokes to say, the defensive guys know football so well that of course they could go over to that side and figure it out. Maybe not as easy as it seems, but something now that I think Patricia could be very well served in doing and building his brand back up, going to the reigning national champions with Ryan Day to become their defensive coordinator. So good to see a former Patriot going on and back to big things, and would not be surprised to see him back in the NFL at some point in the near future. That'll do it for this episode of Pat's Latest. Again, make sure to sign up for it and subscribe to our channel. Get into the comments. Let us know where you would rank Mike Vrabel in this hiring cycle, who you want to see the Patriots draft at number 4 this year, or if they should trade back, who are the free agents that the Pats should be after, and how you would spend a lot of that money, or even if you're saving it for 2026, sorry, no, you can't pocket the cash. Thanks again. Be sure to give us a like if you like what you hear. Go back and listen to our last episodes, and fight on, Foxborough.